Hi, in this video we're going to go over hosting and SEO. So there are a lot of different questions people have in regards to hosting, particularly with SEO. So a few of the top questions are, is one hosting account enough? Can I link my sites together? And are add-on domains okay? So we're going to go over those three along with a few other things, some important things to think about, and a few things that really just aren't a big deal but a lot of people worry about. So I'm going to get into each one of those things. And the first thing that we need to look into is understanding hosting. Understanding that, shared hosting is very normal. Most sites on the internet are on shared servers. So shared hosting is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And most webmasters don't need to worry. If once you start getting into private blog networks and things like that, then you need to start thinking about diversity, not only IP diversity and Class C, the Class C diversity, which may be over your head or not, depending on your experience level. But whether you understand that or not, it doesn't really matter. The data center diversity is what's important when you get into private blog networks and things like that. And in that case, you want to look at the data center diversity, not just the IP diversity, not just the server diversity, but the entire data center diversity. Because if all of your links are coming from, one or two data centers, that's a red flag, and if you don't get penalized, many of those links probably just aren't going to count, or they aren't going to be nearly as powerful as they could be. If you only have a handful of sites, then one account is fine. One shared hosting account even would be perfectly fine. If you have 50 plus sites, and that's just a thrown out there number, there's no magic number, in the same niche or that link together, then you need to think about data center diversity. And the sites in the same niche, that's kind of a shady area. You could be perfectly fine with 50, even 100, 200 sites on the same server in the same niche. You could be, but whenever you have that number of sites on the same server in the same exact niche, it's just something that could possibly raise a red flag depending on what you're doing. So you could do that, just be careful. But if you're linking your sites together, you definitely need to be thinking about diversifying the data centers, basically getting different hosting accounts or getting accounts on sites, hosting companies that offer different data centers, so you can get the diversity in there. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that your site's going to get flagged or penalized, although it possibly could. Most likely what it means is a lot of those links are just going to be devalued, pointing to your site, or just not counted at all. Can I link my sites together? Interlinking your own sites in the same niche is natural. So if you have, let's say you have 5 different web properties, whether they're websites or Web 2.0 sites or whatever they are, it's natural for you to link those together. Don't be afraid to link sites together in the same niche. As long as it makes sense. I mean, look at some big brands out there. They have all kinds of different, or big companies. They have, their different brands under them. They have sister sites, etc., and they're all linked together. And that's a natural thing. That's not, companies trying to game Google. That's just companies, letting people know, their associations, selling products, etc., from their sister sites and etc. So don't be afraid to link relevant sites together. It's natural. But don't interlink irrelevant sites together, because that's not natural. Who links to a completely irrelevant site from their site? Maybe some spammers, that's about it. There's really no reason to do that. Obviously, there's cases where it makes sense, linking to your help desk. Your help desk isn't, the content on your help desk isn't completely related to your product in many cases. Although sometimes it is. It depends, if you have a bunch of different products or not. But, there are different situations where it makes sense, and there are times where it does not make sense. So if it doesn't make sense, don't do it. It's just not going to do you any good. If you get into private blog networks, which are a good idea, these days, they can be powerful, but you want to make sure that when you do this, that you diversify the sites across different data centers. Don't interlink private blog network sites if they're on the same server. You just don't want to do it. If you have a private blog network, you shouldn't have them on the same server anyway, because if you're linking to your own sites. Now, if you have them linking out to different sites and it's only a small percentage of the backlinks to those sites, then it's perfectly fine. But if you're going to be getting a lot of links from the network, then they need to be on different servers, because if a majority of the links pointing to one particular site are coming from just a handful of data centers and in one geographic location, that's going to be a red flag. And again, those links are probably either going to be devalued or not counted at all. Are add-on domains bad for SEO? No, in most cases add-on domains are perfectly fine. Just remember that they share the same IP. So an add-on domain is whenever you have a shared hosting account, you log into your cPanel and you add a domain to that same cPanel instead of having separate cPanels, one cPanel per site on like a reseller or a dedicated server. You just add multiple domains to the same cPanel, and that's perfectly fine. It does create a subdomain, so whatever your primary domain is, let's say it's redwidgets.com, whenever you add an add-on domain, let's say it's bluewidgets.com, it will create a subdomain, so it would be bluewidgets.redwidgets.com, and that's perfectly fine because that subdomain doesn't get out there in the public. It doesn't get linked to, it doesn't get promoted, doesn't hurt you any bit whatsoever. Even if Google came across that subdomain, it really wouldn't matter, because your links, your promotion, your traffic is all going to the actual domain. So subdomains are fine. Just add-on domains are fine. Just keep in mind that they are all the sites that are add-ons to that primary domain all share the same IP. So you don't want to be linking together or anything like that. But it is okay aside from that. Just keep in mind that they share the same IP. Getting your sites on diverse data centers. So there are some cases where it makes sense. Like I've said, a private blog network, primarily with backlinking. That's really what it comes down to. If you're building backlinks from other sites that you own, then you want to get them on different data centers. Now you can have, a small percentage of them on the same hosting account on the same data center. That's fine. Once you get past, say 100 or so, it's going to be really difficult, to get hundreds and hundreds of different data centers, one site per data center. You don't have to get that involved with it. You just want to have a nice natural spread geographically with your data centers, because that's natural. One site just naturally is going to get backlinks from, they might get most of their links from, say, the US and UK and Canada, but it's also natural to get a few spread out, in India and, Africa, wherever. That's natural. If they all come from one focused geographical location, that's a pretty big red flag. So again, that doesn't mean that you need to get every single one of your sites on a different data center. You can just go through, get a few, depending on how big your blog network is. If it's 50 sites, you could get away with, maybe even one hosting account that has several different data centers, or two or three, and that would be perfectly fine. If you have several hundred sites, you might want to look into, getting them spread across, maybe 5 different hosting companies that have several different data centers per company. SEO hosting companies that focus on SEO hosting, that provide hosting, usually, and I haven't gone through and looked at every single offer out there, so I'm not saying they're all horrible, but the ones I know about that I've seen do not resolve the problem. They don't diversify enough, because it would be extremely difficult to offer something like that at an affordable price, because they would have to have data centers in 10, 20 different countries around the world, spread out around the world, and if someone just went out and bought created accounts at these different companies and just kind of white labeled it, it would be a very expensive service. So most of the SEO hosting companies are not any good. They've already been identified by Google. Google knows about them. They see, they see the data centers, and it's just, I personally would just stay away from them. Data center diversity is more important than Class C diversity or even server diversity. So a lot of people talk about Class C diversity, which is, an IP address gets broken down into A, B, C, and D, and you want to get the Class C different, not the same, for each of your sites. Well, that's good, but they're still on the same data center, or they can still be on the same data center, and usually the companies that advertise multiple Class Cs have most of their sites on the same data center, so it doesn't solve the problem. So data center diversity is what's really important. That's the most important thing. You want to get different geographical locations for your backlinks. So if you have a private blog network, you need to make sure that you get them spread out across several different data centers. Use companies with multiple data centers and or $1 hosting companies if needed. The $1 hosting companies, I try to stay away from them just because they're used for spam a lot of times, but there are a lot of them out there that are decent, that are perfectly fine to use. And if you're getting into just, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sites, or even thousands of sites, you want to try to build just an enormous private blog network, you would almost have to get into those dollar hosting companies. But for the most part, you can get away with hosting companies that have multiple data centers, like Site5, site5.com, SITE, the number 5.com, host9.com, HOSTNINE.com, and there are several others that have multiple data centers that you can get your sites built on. So that's really the best way to do it. But like I said, if you have hundreds and hundreds or thousands of sites, then you'd have to get into the dollar hosting as well. Use Web 2.0 properties too, just for backlinking in general, because that diversifies your data centers. The Web 2.0 properties, no matter how many sites you build on WordPress.com or Blogger, they're all going to be coming from the same data centers, but they have multiple data centers for one thing, and they're trusted data centers. Blogger and WordPress for the most part is trusted with Google. That certainly doesn't mean that creating a WordPress.com blog or a Blogger blog is instantly going to get you trust, but they already have a certain amount of trust, just the root domain, and that will give you some better diverse data center IPs. So using Web 2.0 properties is a good idea too. We offer those at Rank Crew. That's a pretty popular package there. But whether you do that or you build them on your own, that's also a good way to diversify those data centers. So that's it. I've gone over pretty much, for the most part, the most important aspects of hosting and SEO. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks.